Where's Omar? Good evening, everyone. It's 7:32. We're going to say pledge, then we're going to go into special meeting and then into work session. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have to have a motion for special.
No, we don't. We'll
No?
just, I'll take the
Just
roll.
vote to vote, fine.
Deputy Mayor has just come in and then we'll get started.
Okay, there you go. All right,
Let me start with the roll. Trustee White,
present.
trustee Fritchie,
Present.
trustee Kazada,
Present.
loud voice, Deputy Mayor Lopez,
Present.
and Mayor Levin.
Present.
Okay. This is this special meeting for a few board resolutions. Is there anyone here to comment on either of the two resolutions before the board this evening? And hang on one second.
What's happening?
I got to get that off the screen.
Okay.
Jamie, is there anyone with regard? Perfect.
No, there's not. No one, if anyone in the gallery would like to raise their hand
Thanks.
to speak,
Okay.
it
Hold
doesn't
on.
look like anyone's doing so.
Okay, how many people do you have?
3.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I feel like this is not actually working.
Resolution A, retain special litigation counsel. Resolved that following review by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign retainer agreements with Sokoloff Stern LLP, 179 Westbury Road, Carl Place, New York, 11514, to serve as special litigation counsel for the matters of claim of Andrea Zambrano versus Village of Ossining et al., claim of Louis Rinaldi versus Village of Ossining et al., and matter of Andrew Pavone versus New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services and Village of Ossining, the terms of the retainers as set forth in the aforementioned agreements. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
We can vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And next resolution. Authorization of small claim assessment review payments for 2022 assessment year. Whereas certain small claim assessment review proceedings were commenced in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of Westchester against the town of Ossining by the following property owners for the 22 assessment year: Christina Ariano, Jeffrey Smith, David Bayer, Sarah Jensen, David Dawson, John Perillo, Rachel Goldman, Joel and Becky Mendez. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining, upon certification by the village treasurer that all of the aforesaid taxes have been paid, hereby authorizes and directs the village treasurer to make such refund of real property taxes to the petitioners listed above. And be it further resolved that the village treasurer is authorized to make the aforesaid payments so that the village may avoid the payment of any penalties. And be it further resolved, the notation shall be made in the margin of the assessment roll that the said assessments were reduced and that the payment of refunds for the overpayment of real property taxes was made pursuant to stipulation. Do I have a motion?
So move. Second.
Stuart.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn the special meeting and go into work session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We are now in work session.
Before we start, are there any, I have announcements, but does anybody else have announcements?
I'll start. I was just running from the library at the Park School parent orientation for folks heading into the pre-K year next year. And I want to give thanks, first of all, in the lobby of the library is Lieutenant Chavez, Detective Chavez, doing his thing. Maybe Lieutenant Chavez one day, keep working hard. And just seeing that series continuing. I'm a lover of chess, and so I love that he's leading that. But to be able to see the community coming together for that particular orientation, it underscores the value of what we do here. Continuing the theme of schools, the mayor and I on separate days this week went to the high school to watch a presentation by a high school class, individual presentation by students on how to improve our village. There were all sorts of ideas ideas from improving the trails to integrating new members of the community through events. And it's wonderful to see our high school students thinking about how to improve our village. I invited them to come to our meetings, and I said, if you come, there won't be a lot of competition. You can make your voice heard, and I speak truth, plenty of seats. So thanks so much.
Dana? Announcements, gentlemen?
I have none.
Anybody? Okay. So continuing on the deputy mayor's theme, earlier today I was at the high school. I think you were there Monday, right?
That's right.
So I'm really excited with what we saw, and it was really a lot of fun. First of all, really nice group of kids, but they had a lot of the three presentations that I saw had a lot to do with topics that we discuss. Although tourism was one of the students' topics, and that's sort of not what we usually talk about here. So I thought I learned a lot. I thought that was really cool. I want to thank them all. Super professional. I also invited them here, but I also invited them, and Paul is going to love the fact that he knows how much I promote our head engineer. I'm always promoting for people to take tours of the water plant, and they were not aware that you could do that. And you all know how much I encourage people to do that. So the teacher was very excited, and hopefully they'll be doing that. I also want to mention that actually today is International Women's Day, but it's actually the month is, Women's Month. Every month now tends to have some sort of a theme in the US. I love it because I think it makes you just take a little breather and focus. And I want to share with you a collage, which I think is really cool, that was done by our staff person, Lori McDonald, who is with, I think, DPW. Oh, building department, excuse me. Sorry, I wrote it down. I can't read my handwriting. Building department. I think it's really cool. I love when everybody here sort of coordinates and, celebrates the months. So I'm psyched about that. I'm actually looking at all the pictures. I do not see Karen Diatori in the picture. So apparently that is sort of missing. I don't know if you have mentioned it to her, but I think for next year, maybe we can add the women of Ossining onto a different collage.
The calendar.
There you go.
Yes, that's exactly what
not
I'm
doing
thinking.
that. I'm not doing that.
Exactly what I'm thinking. We will never be doing.
Like the fire.
Interestingly, we met with a constituent here earlier, the chief of police, Paul Frioli, the manager, myself, about it. We meet, and the staff more than I meet with constituents all the time who have issues, from A through Z. We try to make as much time to meet with our residents or business folks. And it was really interesting, but she was saying that, all the women in Ossining are super powerful, and we all agreed with her, but we did mention that we don't run the entire place, just in case anybody's worried. So she's lived here a long time, and she said something that I have to repeat because we also were sort of stopped. First of all, Paul was super helpful in the discussion we had, but it was also, she is just a big fan of our chief of police. She actually said a couple of times that he's just perfect. And so I said, I've actually never heard anybody say that it was perfect. So the chief dared me to say it publicly. So I'm saying it publicly. You see that? I keep my word. The rest of us just didn't know what to respond because it turned the whole meeting around. It was actually because the topic was challenging. And so we just thought it was great. And I wanted to share that. And even though there are not a lot of people here, we have some tonight, but not a lot. I did get a kick out of the fact that in the high school, I asked them how they got their information for their presentation, and it's mostly off the internet. They looked at our DRI. They had some of the information incorrect because they looked at an older version. So I said to them, this is a thing. I know government moves slowly, but, it was sort of interesting. But they said they actually, a lot of them watched a lot of our Zoom on our meetings that we have with work sessions. And also legislative, because that's part of what they're learning, and they thought it was really cool. I also said they should come in person, but they were like, well, but we have it on Zoom. So I felt good that people are watching, our meetings. And I think, because sometimes I wonder, but
here we are. People are actually watching and putting presentations. I thought it was really, it made me feel good. What can I tell you? I think that's on my announcements. I think I thought there was something going on this weekend, but I must be wrong. Must be for next weekend. I thought there was an event this weekend. No? Okay. I didn't write it down, so I don't know. There is a blood drive. There's apparently a shortage of, and every few months this happens, and they're doing one in Ossining, the blood center. Thank you for reminding me. The thing that's important about that piece is it also gives you an opportunity to make sure that you know a little bit about yourself, because they'll actually send you your blood type with a card. If you're in an accident, you'll have, not everybody knows their blood type, which is important, but also there seems to be a shortage right now in New York State. So there are blood drives around, and Ossining's turn is now. So we are going to turn it over for the rest of the agenda.
First, I'd like to invite our perfect police chief up to the
Not living this down.
the table to give a first quarter report on police reform.
Good evening. Are we going to have the spreadsheet up?
I don't know. Did you send it in to Jamie?
No, it's on the,
The website.
You have to let her know where it is.
oh, I'm sorry. That's,
I'll find it. Give me just a moment and I'll put it up.
sure, I'll give my intro here for a minute. So, yes, nice to hear residents say nice things. Most of that just a reflection of the good work that the cops on the streets do. I have the good fortune of being their representative most of the time. In terms of reform, along those lines, lots of good work being done. What we'll have to report in this is steady progress on the handful of things that were left in progress last time. Some of the things that were marked done, we have continued progress on. There are a couple of things that were sort of aspirational type goals that were state legislative and things of that nature that that we won't have movement on just because we haven't seen that at the county or state level. So how's that, Jamie, for time?
I'm still looking.
Okay. Well, here's what I'll do. I made some notes on the things that we have been working on, and then we can point out where they categorize into when we come on to this. A lot of what the reform process focused on was looking for ways that we could change either the training or the way officers spend time. Oh, look at this. We're screen sharing. That means we're close. One of the major things that was asked in the reform process was for officers to undergo crisis intervention training. That training is offered in the police academy as the standard curriculum. And at this point, we have more than half of our department certified through that. Oh, there we go. Let's start from the top now.
Could you zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to be able to see that.
Really? I'm actually able to.
Well, what I can tell you is the first,
Oh.
I think 6 of those all deal with local law number 1 of 2023, which was passed recently and now is on the books. So all of those can now be marked done. They were in process. They all deal with code changes that affected the Civilian Police Complaint Review Board. So all those ones that you see there through number 6, number 7, number 8, all of those deal with that. So those can all be marked done. In terms of the legislation being done, those things are there. Now the issue is putting them into practice. So the next thing that comes up there is training of members. Lieutenant Zimmerman has reached out and has begun scheduling them. In addition to that, he's going to have sessions for the Police Reform Advisory Committee so that they can get a look at all of the training that's done, as well as whatever other elements of police training they want. Hold on there, Jamie. Can't see where we're at. Yeah, those are done. Those are done. So not started. County and state levels to reform indemnification. So again, that's outside my hands, but
What number are you on? I lost
number
you.
number 13 was the next one that was said
Okay.
not started. That's the issue of indemnification. That's outside my scope, so I'm going to leave that be. When you come down to number 16, it talks about our policies with the LGBTQ plus community. We had sent all of our policies over to the loft for review. Mayor, you had specifically asked that Christina Picciano be involved in that.
Right.
At last check, she is working with the loft, and we had made the executive director aware. I did follow up with her recently, and she had some setbacks at work. Not Christina, but the executive director. We are due to be in touch. We're waiting to hear back from her. We did confirm that she is still on board to help us with those policies.
Okay.
Included in that, we had asked for training if they wanted to come in and do in-service training for us this year, which they had confirmed that they're available for. So that's just a matter of scheduling once we get our policies done. Generally, our strategy is to have the policy printed first, the training to come after, so that we can incorporate anything new from those policies into the training evolutions.
Right, so the way this is set up, it was what we agreed were the steps out of the police reform. So it's good because at some point it's going to say done.
Correct.
But what this sort of list, and I'm also speaking to you, but also to Jamie, what happens here is the next steps. There's almost like, so now you're going to say done at some point.
Well,
on
that one
number 60.
that one I wouldn't consider done. That's still in from my perspective. Number 16 there, where it talks about training, and the other one for policy.
Right.
Until the policy is on the books and the training is completed, that's still in process.
Okay, so I think in the comments section, just a
Sure.
little bit more on that, because if somebody's just reading it,
Right.
it doesn't speak to the amount of work and like the actual accomplishments. There's
Mhm.
like two parts to it. So I would change the words and update that to reflect exactly what you're
Sure.
saying, because it's almost too top line the way it's written.
Right. Right.
I'm updating it as we speak.
Oh, are you? Okay, thanks.
Okay. So
Up to 17. the-
17 and 18 are marked done on there. So the mobile crisis team, just to talk about them for a minute, they are doing tremendous work in the community. That program was rolled out countywide. It's not the same experience everywhere you go. There were different vendors providing that service in different places. Some of those vendors weren't able to fully staff teams. Even in the best case scenarios, I don't think anybody's operating 24/7. Ours is currently operating from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Friday and on call in the after hours. Our team really generally has been the example for Westchester County. They go on calls all day long. They're going on calls on their own. They're being dispatched independently where it's appropriate, with police officers where it's not. They're doing follow-up after calls. The officers are interacting with them all day, every day. It's really been a really great experience so far. A little bit of an adjustment for some of the staff, but overall, I'd really say that of everything that's on the reform schedule here, the impact that you'll see from the mobile crisis response team is probably the most noticeable and tangible return that we've gotten from all the work we've put in here.
Great.
19. So 19 talks about a nonprofit agency that would co-respond. We haven't made progress on this one, and quite frankly, it's a little bit challenging. It would be very challenging to do in the face of the mobile crisis team and how much of a change of the nature of the work that we do right now. That contemplates folks that would respond either in lieu of police officers or other people to be responding along with police officers. Having the mobile crisis team co-responding now has been a lift to really roll that out and make sure that it's functional. We haven't seen anybody else in this area that has a co-response team that's some other type of agency. So it's something we'll continue looking into, but I think that a lot of what was sought in that particular item is really being handled by the concept of the mobile
Yeah.
crisis response
I was
team.
just going to say that I think again, we go through so many different issues in any one meeting, it's hard to remember every single element. But I feel that this number 19 was really in lieu. We didn't know where the county was going when we did this. So the state, the county, we just weren't sure. This was sort of, well, if the county doesn't put something together and you guys can't because you're too small, how about using
Right.
Agencies like social, there's like WJCS, there's a bunch of these agencies out there. So I think this has to also be written to say that this was originally thought of in case the county wasn't able to come forth, but then the county did come forth with a commitment, and it's at least a 3-year commitment. We're probably 3-year, not even finishing year 1 yet.
I can't see a world where this doesn't get renewed
Exactly
and
right.
expanded.
Exactly right, because it's successful, not in all, but in most cases. So we might want to just reword it a little bit if you're updating this.
I think you're right. The foundational concept there really was that someone other than just cops were able to respond on calls. The calls that the mobile crisis team are going on independently, if we get a call for a specific example was that we had a youth who was having some harmful thoughts. no weapons involved, nothing of that nature. There's really no need for a cop to show up on that one. And we're allowed to send the mobile crisis team on their own. They have communications with us. If they need us, we'll come and we'll, if it becomes a dangerous situation. But where we can, we're trying to send them on their own. For the most part, they're co-responding with cops. That's both for their safety and just, it's always easier to start with more and scale back. But I think that a lot of what was sought in that number really is happening with the mobile crisis team. But it's okay to leave open. And if we find some better option and way to do things, we're always looking for additional ways to do business.
Right.
All right. So number 20, crisis intervention training. Like I said, with every officer that we're hired, every officer that's hired is crisis intervention trained. So our ratio of those that have been through it to those that have not goes up every day. We are still looking for options for existing officers to go through that. But through attrition and new hires, it's quickly being resolved. That was those. Number 21. So public awareness campaign in English and Spanish. We've spent, I know everybody's seen a tremendous amount of effort, or at least Detective Chavez has specifically. We're all trying to contribute to his efforts, but it is a very personal project for him. It hasn't necessarily focused on ICE. As board members are aware, there haven't been a lot of instances of ICE's presence in our community that we're aware of. They may be here and haven't told us, but the occurrences are far less frequent than what they were, say, 10 years ago. So I don't know if that's the primary concern in our community, but what we have focused on through our Spanish language outreach is other issues that impact the native Spanish speaking community. So things like food insecurity. He's worked on how to conduct yourself during a traffic stop and what exactly the officers are doing. Even down to the chess matches that he hosts are opportunities to engage with our neighbors so that we can have those conversations where people bring out the things that they're concerned with. What the public generally doesn't see is through that avenue. I get all of the alerts on all of our social media channels, and Detective Chavez answers messages, I'd say conservatively 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. His phone is never not going off. And I can tell you that they're not just coming from people in Austin. They're coming from all over the region. Other people saying my police department doesn't have an aspect like this. And I really have a question. I just wanted to ask about who I would ask in my town about this thing that's going on. And it's given him a great sense of ownership and pride in our community and our department. It is, I imagine, exhausting. He's tired often. He's generally not compensated for all the hours he works in pay, but he has it in love in his heart, and he's doing a great job. So we've done a lot with that. Like I said, ICE hasn't necessarily been a major issue for us lately, so it hasn't been the focus of our communications.
Now, the thing about what he's doing, it's a Spanish language Facebook account. Are we doing the same thing in English, like in the who's running?
So it was never planned that the two channels would go in
Right,
parallels. They were
understood.
meant to be targeted in terms of the amount of content we're putting out. He's obviously putting out more content. Our other channels still go as they do, maybe not as active as they've been in the past, and we could be doing more with those. But they were never designed to be parallel paths. His
No,
would
I
always be
understand,
different
but
messaging.
it feels like it doesn't have to be parallel, but there should be more on the other one as well.
Okay.
Because it sounds to me like he's coming up with some really nifty ideas. And I don't use that word often, but why not, do a little bit more on social media, for the other channel, I guess.
I'd also be curious how social media use has changed over time, because years ago, Facebook was a more active place. It's becoming less so over time. And so it could be that attention is shifting towards something.
Yeah, from what we've seen in the Spanish speaking community, they've got a bigger footprint on Facebook because it's a little bit more robust in terms of communicating with family back home, perhaps. The English speaking platforms, Facebook is really sort of not the same level of following or level of engagement as some of the other platforms, but sure, they change over time. Twitter has changed dramatically over the last 2 or 3 years in terms of who's using it and how, and we see that in all kinds of different ways.
Do you have an idea of where it should be if it's not Facebook? Facebook is highly used by people 50 plus, but if you do you have some thoughts, because it's time to sort of revisit this.
Sure, our demographics are generally our main following has always been female 36 to 44. Generally, the reason for that, I think, at least in my conversations, has been that they are parents in our school district. They're the information gatherers. They always have been in this community, at least. And when we're sharing information, those are the folks that are checking for the relevant things that are out there.
Right.
In terms of platforms, the way ours is initially designed is that Facebook was our long form editorialized information sharing. Instagram was more behind the scenes. Twitter was quick hit and mostly both my personal thoughts on there and then department stuff that's really quick hit and emergency notifications. Nixle only for emergencies. We had run Snapchat for a very short period of time, and the officer that was doing that just didn't have the interest in doing it. So we put that down.
TikTok.
TikTok's complicated and
You have to make little movies and stuff.
yeah,
whole
TikTok's
thing.
complicated and you've really got to
Also,
have
I'm
somebody
not
that
sure
wants
the
to perform.
municipalities are supposed to be using TikTok, actually.
For safety
some-
reasons, people have advised against it. Some departments are using it as long as you're not putting anything out that's sensitive. There's a way to do it that you'd be sort of avoiding the harm, but at the same time, it takes a special kind of person, even if you had a perfect platform like that
Yeah.
to do those types of things.
I mean, I don't think there is a replacement for Facebook at this time.
No. I would
Yeah,
never
but
suggest
I
that we
mean,
replace any of them. We've always tried to add, and not take away.
And it sounds like the Facebook page in Spanish is really successful. And I also know that Austin Padres Hispanos has a big following on Facebook. And it may be some of those same folks follow the Facebook page for the police in Spanish. But you know, I right now, it seems to me Facebook is still kind of what we have.
All right. So the next thing comes up was our community outreach efforts. This late winter, early spring is sort of our quiet time for all this. We're putting together our summer calendar now of events, so we haven't published anything yet, but we expect to be announcing some stuff very soon. The loft and our project with them, we'd already talked about. Jamie, if you could just roll up a bit. Okay, so in terms of diversifying the police department, and I think this overlaps with another one here, right after that talks about recruiting in Austin High School. Rather than coming up with a specific recruiting program in the high school, what we've done is we've taken Officer Tompkins, who is not only our school resource officer, but he is also a certified teacher in New York State. And he has been pushing in a number of classes and either guest lecturing for teachers or speaking in those classes, as well as bringing in other people from our department to do that. He is scheduled right now. I don't know if it's been announced to the district yet. He's actually going to be teaching a summer school class on his own in the district on something government related with policing. So he's going to have a class of his own for a few weeks this summer in summer school. And that's what our strategy has been so far. The next civil service exam is about 2 years away. So we're getting ready to start rolling out recruitment for that. As you know, it's an unusual circumstance to recruit for that. We spend a very long period of time telling people it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then we have 2 weeks to sign people up or 3 weeks to sign them up, and then the test is given. So it's a challenge to manage recruiting for something that we oftentimes people lose interest in by the time it becomes available or miss the window when it's there. So our multi-year training plan there. So here's the things that we're doing with that. We talked about crisis intervention training through the police academy, but in terms of things that we're doing in-house, last year we had sent 2 officers to be certified as to the instructor trainer course for New York State's procedural justice course. Those officers are going to be rolling that program out to every officer in our department. So that's going to be one of our major training evolutions this year, is that every officer will go through procedural justice training. Second to that, Sergeant Irving is now working on applications and looking into our option to begin the active bystander for law enforcement program through Georgetown University. So I know that the city of Yonkers had implemented that program. I don't think anybody else in Westchester County has. I believe that Newburgh did it. But it's a really great program that not too many people in this area are doing. Active bystander aimed at creating policies and training for officers so that when they see misconduct in their coworkers, it empowers them to take action against it, all aimed at trying to put out a better product. Those are our big, and then in addition to that, like I said, we were looking to do some training with the loft for our LGBTQ policies and practices.
And in case, I mean, we didn't say before, the Loft is sort of a county-wide organization. I guess they're 501c, I don't remember. But I mean, they've really built a lot of traction to deal with these issues, and they've been very active. So I'm really happy that we're so involved with them. So that's it. I guess you went, the committee was set.
Yeah, the last couple
Okay.
things there are just to implement, to talk to Westchester County. That really requires movement from the state with the Division of Criminal Justice Services in order to change the number of hours in the police academy, which becomes a bit of a mandate on the municipalities because we're paying people to stay in the academy for longer. But I know that DCJS talks about it all the time. We don't necessarily have a direct impact on the curriculum in the academy, but to the extent that we have these conversations among either the county or state chiefs organizations, we are always looking for best options to add to the curriculum.
Okay. Anybody have questions or comments? Thank you, Chief. Anybody? Questions, comments? Anybody? No. Great update. I forgot we're doing this twice a year
Yes.
and appreciate it. Thank you. Work session, you're on, village manager.
So next up is community development block grant funding that we have for streetscaping at James Street. This is money that we were awarded. This is a federal program that's run through the county. We were awarded this money for the 2019 to 2021 funding cycle, but things are a little bit delayed, mostly due to COVID. So I would like to introduce our Director of Public Works, Paul Fraioli, and our village engineer also to discuss this project.
Good evening, Mayor and Board.
Good evening.
What she said, good night. No, just kidding. Okay, so the funding cycle from 19 to 21, as the manager referenced, is stalled like a lot of things that we are dealing with. This is HUD money that comes from the feds all the way down through Westchester County's planning department as the administrator of those funds. So there's some, administrative burden associated with getting that money. And that's really what this proposal is all about. We've done agreements like this with engineering firms in the past when we use CDBG money. This is a project that I've spoke to you about in advance of that funding cycle, and it was funded as a 50% match. It's approximately a $400,000 project with a $200,000 commitment from CDBG and a $200,000 commitment from the Village of Ossining. It's for primarily sidewalk, curb, and apron restoration on the James Street corridor. If you get the theme of what we're trying to do down there, we worked on Broad. We're working on the intersection of Spring and Main. We did State a few years back. We did some sidewalk improvements along Broad as well prior to paving it. And now we're working our way south along that corridor. James Street is a logical perpendicular road to Spring. And then Spring Street is the big one, which you've also discussed with me at a meeting about capital projects for this past year, and is a CDBG project that the county is presently designing now. So they're also behind on that, but we'll be doing something similar to this Spring Street project probably next year, is what they're telling me, when they think they're going to be done with their design work.
I'm
So-
sorry, James Street is when and Spring Street is when?
James Street is hopefully this summer. They're more or less done with the documents. What this agreement does is it allows for a consulting firm that is also going to develop bid documents with the county's landscape architect efforts. And then they're going to do some inspection services and construction management in the field, which could be it's a pretty big lift when it comes to CDBG funds, because you're not just looking at the work, but you're also doing Davis-Bacon interviews and doing some extra administrative hurdles to get the proper drawdown paperwork in place, other than just invoicing from contractors, which is what we do when you see me doing sidewalk work with our annual bidders. So the project proposal, which I think you had sent to you. And if you haven't, I'll just do a quick review. is broken into two parts. There's the bidding phase, which will entail taking the county's produced documents, creating a bid document out of it, and assisting the village with putting this out on the street and soliciting bids from primarily concrete contractors and landscape contractors. Then there's the construction phase, which is going to be the real manpower effort, where we're going to have someone in the field monitoring the Davis-Bacon wage requirements and the work efforts in the field, so that we can do this thing with in harmony with the neighborhood activities on James Street. It's a busy place, and it's going to be disruptive, but it's going to be a good fit in the end. Total project cost again was about $400,000. So I've been in front of you numerous times for CM and engineering services. And I think by now you all know that the soft costs run about 10 to 20% of the project. So you can see where this is not heavy on the design phase. So the $37,000 or the $37,500 request is a little less than the 10%. So it's right around where we kind of anticipated it coming in. It will be written up as all our contracts where we're going to draw down based on their hourly rate. So if they're not there as long as we expect them to be, we will not pay the full 37.5. And we certainly don't allow them to go over without an extenuating circumstance. And I don't anticipate it here. It's really a very straightforward project. Our office is going to be doing a lot of administrative work to really offset a lot of their effort. I'll be in the field a lot as well for this one. And we're looking forward to getting that out of the way because they need it. That street needs it. And it's going to be nice to get out of the way in advance of the big one, which is the Spring Street corridor rehabilitation, which is really going to be a big improvement for that entire area. And the county's in the midst of designing that now. So we're looking to get that done.
Okay. All good stuff.
Thank you.
Don't go away yet. Questions, comments on this side? On this side? You're good?
I have questions.
Okay.
So refresh my memory. What side to what side is James? Is it the whole length of James?
We usually refer to James as, from Highland Avenue down past Spring to the Breakneck Hill. Then it becomes a
Come up
paper.
with a different name, but
Yeah, then it becomes a paper road, and then there's Lower James, which is just off of Hunter. And no, there's no, this is not in the scope of that project.
So pretty much it stops at the project between, I'm gonna call it the cul-de-sac. pretty
Yes.
much, Of James.
Yeah, the more or less it's a little turnaround over there by the guardrail.
So,
Yeah.
so I have several questions, and just bear with me.
Shoot.
So 34 State Street project,
Mhm.
right, which it has a current permit right now. They haven't done anything yet, as far as I know. As part of the site plan approval, they were actually supposed to be doing a lot of the work that we are referring to in this particular project, correct?
Yeah, so when the first owners, and a lot of this is going to be from my memory, not from my notes, from when the first owners came in and presented that 34 State Street Partners, their site plan review included, yes, it did include some streetscape improvements in the first owner's application that was approved. Then that project went sideways, and the village with a CDBG project of State Street did a lot of the streetscape work associated with that. So what the village did at that point, when the second applicant came in and said, hey, a new applicant, we did a lot of the pound of flesh that the first applicant was going to do on your behalf. So now we want you to contribute towards the water main project. And that was something that we administered with Stewart's office, where the applicant paid for a prorated portion of the water main that was around the perimeter of that site plan. So they did that. And then they made that payment. We also added for, I think, and we're now on the third applicant for that project. We added the that area of the path between Upper and Lower James Street to make it a little more pedestrian friendly.
But that's, again, so the
As
reason
part
why
of
I'm
their
bringing this
improvement.
up, and not to interrupt, and I've been through that process, sure, there is some money set aside in this particular project that whenever that will happen, is supposed to actually do a lot of the sidewalk improvement that we are going to be paying for, the CBD money and the village money.
Not in this scope, no. Well, I knew,
That's what I wanted.
no,
That's-
I knew that when I was scoping out with the county and we were walking what needs to be improved.
Okay.
what we asked to be included in their scope does not overlay what the applicant for 34 State Street was
So
looking
you
to.
check the site plan approval from 34 State Street and
Yes.
you coordinate all that stuff. Okay.
Yeah,
So now, and I'm gonna knock on wood, hopefully at some point we'll get the money and actually start doing the sign improvements from this developer, whoever the developer may be. The other question that I have for you is, help me understand this a little. Maybe I should have asked these questions in the prior reiterations of something similar to this. When we're talking about soft costs and design, either by an engineer, county-wise, when we're talking about specs and when we're talking about landscape,
Mhm.
I'm looking at James, and just to make sure I was gonna say the right things in here. We're talking about concrete and green. What
what's the
is
second
line-
thing you said? Concrete and what?
And
It's
green.
just green space. It's about 2 feet of green, the grass that is in there. So you have a green buffer.
Yeah.
And there's barely any trees. There's actually, I see a lot of poles, light poles in there and the sidewalks instead of trees. So when we're talking about landscape, when you're talking about soft costs and it's being engineered by the county, what are they doing? Because we have already specs. Sure, if I wanted to do a sidewalk in front of my house, I go to your office.
Yeah.
You guys have already spec'd out.
And we,
Then I can just refer that to back and I just go back and get a contract or hire you guys, the local contractor, and do the work myself.
correct.
So what is that the county is doing
Okay.
that is different than what we already have?
It's a good question. If, and I'll answer it like this. If you said to me, Paul, we want your crews to go take care of James Street and give them all new sidewalks, we could very well go in there and do the sidewalk and the curb work in-house. We know the details. I can inspect it and do the layout. However, with the federal money that comes in, there's requirements. It requires public bidding. It requires some bidding components that include, like I said, Davis-Bacon, and there's minority business requests and all those other things that go along with this money to create their scope. They also request it to be surveyed so they can put it onto an engineered site plan with elevations and such and do an actual bid. So there is a lot of, I don't want to call it overkill, but they definitely, they make it a lot more detailed than typically would be if we just wanted to do a sidewalk assessment work. But there are components to this project that are not strictly sidewalk and curb. We have some of that green space on there. If you look, if you were to look at the contract documents, they include at the corner of James and State, there's the green space is really a little rain garden detail that we did on either side of the road. We took some of the stormwater and put it into a shoulder buffer, which is going to be a little detention / polishing pond with some vegetation in it versus what's there now, which is concrete. Some of the trees that we put in there are more appropriately planted in green space versus the ones that are there now that are kind of sprawling roots because they're kind of compressed by the existing sidewalk. So there's a lot of green details that go into it that are going to be a nice improvement for that area down there. And again, it's a contract document, and you can't put out a contract document that's going to get an appropriate bid by just telling contractors how much would it cost to give us new sidewalks and curbs from Highland Avenue down to Lower James. You
That-
need a lot more detailed documents that go along with that.
Thank you. And I just, anyway.
Let me point one important part. The village match on CDBG projects, we're allowed to submit these soft costs that I'm asking you for now and the survey costs. We're allowed to send that as part of our match. So we've already, if we do this and we did some surveying work, which, and Karen, I'm going to guess because I don't know the exact amount, maybe it was $15,000 to do the 2-foot contour topography and survey of that corridor. That plus the 30,000, $45,000, we've already have now checked the box for our $200,000 commitment. So we really only have to come up with, out of the fund balance, which I went over with Dale, another $155,000 plus or minus in order to get the 200,000 from the county.
I don't, I'm not questioning that. What for me is, and I'm not debating, so I guess there's a logic at some point, sure, I guess. What I'm saying is like all these soft costs, we can actually put that towards the project itself instead of, I want to say, not utilizing the engineers, because when you talked about two foot contour, and all these additional drawings, the county already has that as a part of the GIS process. The county already has the 2 foot contours already as part of the system itself. So to me, kind of.
It's the county, yeah, but it's the county that solicited this, that wanted the
I'm
survey.
not disagree. I'm not
I get it.
disagreeing with you. I'm
It's
just saying, the bureaucracy sometimes and not level, I don't disagree with that. I think instead of us wasting the $15,000 or $20,000 of soft costs, we can actually put that towards here, because when the CD comes out, when it goes out to bids, it may not be $400,000.
I get it. And believe me, there's no one wants to keep the money in bricks and mortar more than me. I understand your position exactly, but the fact of the matter is this is the public sector, and we can't do things with this. We have to be very specific, and
We do it. We don't have to go through that as a village.
well, yeah, but we have details and we have a lot of
But
coverage.
How different is going to be the details from what we have to what they're going to be producing? There's not much of a difference.
as far as the specification of the concrete, they're the same essentially.
I know.
But there's still a bid document that goes to public bidding, which is not the case when we do it in-house. So I get it.
Forward to
I am
the
not looking forward.
finished product. I'm not, philosophically, we can argue all, you and I can do that.
I wasn't arguing.
I can argue with you. But yes, I don't have any questions. Obviously, those, I understand. So I'm just curious to see the rain garden portion that you can show me at some point. Because I'm looking at the James and State intersection, and it's kind of hard for me to figure that out. Where's that going to be?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So I get all the stuff, I think. I'm curious as to what the rain garden looks like. I have now understood that while I love these really large trees, they create shades, oxygen, etc. And in densely populated area, they just add not only beauty, but I have also learned from you guys that they're actually not the appropriate trees to be putting in sidewalks where there's only 2 feet of grass, because they actually, as they get deeper and deeper roots, they actually lift up the concrete, the curbs, the road, the landscaping. So you're now using different kind of shrubbery, which is great. I would love to see, once the bidding is over, I'm looking over here because Manny has it up on the screen, the street. I would really, number one, I don't care what the county does, they are not to get rid of the green space on that block, because they tend to pour concrete on everything. It's bad for the environment, and frankly, it's ugly. And it makes the place look very urban rather than suburban, which is what we are. And there's really not any benefit to people living there at all. But I'm really interested in the rain gardens, like how it's going to look. So once you're able to do it pictorially, I'd love it to be on the website, or at the very least send it to us, because I'm trying to visualize everything you're describing. That sounds really cool. So as soon as you're able to, I'd like to see some rendering, even if it costs some money to do it and the village has to pay for it, because I think people who live on streets should see what final products, at least in a rendering, will look like, so they understand what's going on, not understand it once it's complete. I just think it's a nice communications service to the community. And besides, I like to actually understand what it looks like. So I think it's really cool. I love the fact that you're doing rain gardens. They're actually very effective drainage systems, and they're much more natural. So
Yeah. So the what we usually do is hand out like a little flyer to the basically the street, and then maybe some tributary streets to give them a heads up that a little bit of a storm is coming. So I'll try to put some educational stuff in there too, and some links, and they can kind of log on and see what's going on. And then I'll work with
it should be
Karen's
put
office.
on the website
Yeah,
too.
I'll work on
Because
it.
I think it's you're doing a great job. I've said this like 100 times. Just need to communicate some of this stuff so people appreciate some of the thoughts that go into it. And also many people are visual learners. as you've learned, because when you show me these wonderful designs, I don't understand any of it, right? I could do numbers, but, and I think a lot of people are visual, not everybody. So I think this is great. Good stuff. I mean, it's like every month we're moving right along. Are you done? 'Cause
I just had one more question. I guess the
'cause I have a
time
different
frame.
question.
Yeah, when this is ready to go, how long is it gonna take for the whole work to be completed, I guess, more or less? And I'm not gonna call you to that.
I think once the contractor is on board and we mobilize, I think a couple of months. So I think, you know, it-
A
yeah,
couple is two or
two.
more.
No, but I'm
The
just saying.
definition of the word a
Yeah.
couple is
2 to
two or
3
more.
months.
Yes, that's the definition of a couple. And also then you're doing Spring Street, because you said that about.
No,
10,
that's
15
for
minutes
next
ago.
year. That's
Spring
next
Right,
year.
Street's,
that's 24.
Spring Street is, we're still beholden to the
24.
county's final design
Okay.
work on that, but yeah.
All right, but that says to me every 2, 3 months,
But
we're
we're not
making
doing, we're not
improvements.
doing the street. We're not repaving the street.
James Street? It's likely after we finish all the concrete work. If we have money left over in our CHIPS monies, I'm gonna probably come back to Karen and say, hey, can I overlay it?
CDBG work is streetscaping sidewalks only. So
But if
yeah.
there's money, then we can, maybe, we'll see. Is that it?
I'm just looking for Spring Street at some point next year. I guess we'll have that conversation.
All right, every year we have a different conversation. Are you done?
I'm good.
So separate, not to blindside you, which means that I'm about to blindside you, so. We are supposed to get these garbage cans that we're paying a lot of money for that are solar.
Friday. Yeah.
We're supposed to be January, then February. We're now in March. so-
Friday. They're being
Get outta
delivered.
here.
This
I almost-
Friday? No, this Friday?
Yeah,
Yeah, they'll be
Ooh.
delivered to DPW. They're going to be delivered to the DPW site. And then we're going to be placing them over the next couple of weeks, Friday.
So it'll be great. Obviously, you want to make sure they work, so we're
Make
not
sure
going to
that-
publicize it till it's out
Yeah.
there a week or so, make sure that works, but then we want to do some sort of a education.
yeah, we got
Put
an.
it on the
we-
website. Look, Jamie's having a heart attack over here because every fifth word is it should go on the website, it should go on. the
No,
website.
I'm not. I love this stuff. I'm making
No,
videos
this'll
all
be
over
great.
the place these days.
No,
Don't worry. We got it.
So
Yeah,
we
this'll be
got an
good.
email this afternoon confirming there was some shipping snafus.
Of course. there
But
were.
there'll be, all of them should be in Friday. But safe to say we'll have them all by next week sometime. There's also software that goes along with it that we have to learn how to use because it also, I don't remember, if you remember the presentation, but they're solar powered.
Yeah,
not just to
I remember.
activate the units with the foot pedals, but they also send a signal that we can access and see what's
Our
full
new
and
trash
what's not
cans
full.
come with software.
They
Well,
do.
That's the whole point.
They're
because they
smart
can
Those
also-
are the
cans.
21st century.
I know, and also you could attach cameras to them.
You know, I don't know how
That
much
was-
time anybody on the board spends in Manhattan, but they're everywhere, man.
No, I've seen them. That's what
Everywhere.
reminded me.
I mean, from the Bronx.
What's the
all the way
brand
down
name
to-
of them if people want to look it up?
Big
Big
Belly.
bellies.
Big belly.
Big Belly.
The thing about Manhattan, though, in all fairness, is they've got like 7 or 8 different vendors all over the city. So when you see one, all of a sudden you walk 2 blocks and there's a whole different kind of garbage can. And I guess they're also now passing laws about composting for, there's been such an increase from COVID of animals in the city that's causing a huge problem. So it's great to live outside of New York City because they really do actually have some really cool things that we can learn from them. They also have a very cool budget. But I'm excited. I didn't realize that it was this afternoon, so I didn't want to blind, but now I'm happy I asked it.
And you blindsided me, so I'll blindside you.
Oh, no, it doesn't
Yeah.
work that way, actually, just so you know, but go
Well,
ahead.
you want this one.
Okay.
The solar panels arrived on site to the operations center.
Oh,
So they're going to start putting them on the roof later this week and through the following couple of
I'm
weeks.
excited. I actually went with somebody to look at the solar panels in Maryknoll today because, well, like, no matter what you do, there's pros and cons. But it's a constituent. She was all upset because what happens is it creates a lot of shade because the sun hits the solar panel. It goes, now I don't get any sun on my car. And I love the sun and all that. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to think about this because it keeps your car in the shade, which is good in the summer, but in the winter, the car doesn't warm up from the sun. which is what people get. So,
Nor will it get snow
but,
on it.
but
That's true.
yes.
And our
normally-
canopy
Normally we
project-
get snow, but I will say that regardless of that conversation, I got to drive around. I was actually asking a couple of people who park their cars under there. It's getting good reviews, really solid, like this is a great idea. The cars stay cleaner. The pavement stays cleaner. When it rained, when there was a storm, they were actually afraid that some of the trees, some of the debris, nothing happened. I mean, I know that happened on my house. We've had big branches fall down. I forget what they're made of, but nothing happens to the panels or the electrical. So I'm just excited because I'm looking forward to it. And
Our
when you do it-
our canopy vendor down at the train station is doing his utility survey with us this week. And he's going to start his final design soon
Great.
thereafter. And I think the canopy project is likely to go into final design and construction maybe within a year. So we'll be right behind the operations center. When that's finishing up, we'll be diving into the one at the train station. And those are our 2 sites. So, yeah.
No, this is exciting stuff. No, I'm very excited. I mean, for our village, this is, a lot of movement. So I'm thrilled. Thank you. Are you finished or?
I'm hanging around for the road diet conversation, I think, at the end. So I'll
Okay.
be here. Thank
Great.
you.
Should we move that up so we don't have to keep people here or?
We can do that. It's a, so next up, I will be talking about our Route 9 road diet and just giving an update. Last week, I provided a bit of an update, but we are moving ahead. We just filed the preliminary paperwork with the state DOT today. And we will be, our next step is to engage to issue an RFP for the design services for the road diet. So we'd like to, next week, we'll have a resolution allowing me to issue the RFP. Okay. And we're working on that now. So we'll make sure that we share that with you once we have a completed draft. It's an exciting project. As you know, we received $4 million from the federal government that now is being distributed through the state DOT to design and construct the road diet. There's a few things that we're sort of working out with the DOT because again, when you have funding coming through multiple channels of government, there's always some level of bureaucracy involved, but we're excited to be moving forward with this.
No, I think it's great. I heard you describing it to someone because I've already seen it on some parts of social media, although I don't answer social media because once I do that, it becomes this huge back and forth, sort of a rabbit hole concept. But I think we have to really explain to people that there's more than 2 key aspects to the road diet. But for me, these are 2 big ones that should be spoken about over and over. One is to really calm the traffic. This idea that as people go north to south from Croton, up until you get to Croton, Route 9 is it's a highway in some ways. People are going 55 to 65, et cetera. And then they get into Croton, they don't really slow down and they come right into Ossining. And boom, it becomes really a local road, just like it does in Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. But we're like the first ones. And this is supposed to have a calming effect, meaning that people are just speeding through here, dangerous driving, et cetera, et cetera. And it makes it very difficult for that reason for people to cross the street where appropriate, including to our community center, et cetera. And it's supposed to create additional parking so that commerce can come back to life on Route 9. The stores that are there that can be there will have some parking, might add additional parking to community center. We're not talking about thousands of spaces, but nevertheless, just like when you drive through Tarrytown, it does create some more linear traffic, linear parking that should help retail and commerce. So I'm excited about it, but I think we just have to make it clear. And somebody said to me, well, it's going to create more traffic. And the answer is it's actually a local road. That road is not designed to be a highway going through villages and towns. It's when it started, who knows how many 100 years ago, it was the only road, but there is a reason. And for me, just seeing people with kids running for their life across Route 9, Forget the other esoteric conversations. I'm tired of seeing that. So I think this is a great project. I don't know, 20 years in the making, 15 years, something like a long time. So it's exciting, but I do want to, when we speak about it, also be very clear of, I know there are more benefits in that, but these are the two.
So there will be continued public engagement, particularly, as we embark on the design phase. That's part of the requirements of the funding. I think you mentioned some very important points. It's traffic calming. It will slow traffic, and that's actually a desired outcome of this. It doesn't create more traffic. It slows existing traffic. If anything, it may reroute some traffic
Yeah.
that maybe is more appropriate for 9A, but the main issue is to calm the traffic. It really fits in very well with the things that we hear from many, many constituents about walkability, safety, speeding. Increasingly, these are becoming really big issues for members of the community. We hear about them a lot. So this will be an element that will calm traffic in an area that's really central to the community. So the ability to have greater connectivity between Croton Avenue and Main Street, as well as the ancillary streets. When Route 9 was widened, it did bifurcate the village to a certain extent. We have schools on either side. We have students walking to these schools. We have increased number of people just walking, generally speaking. We want to encourage that. We
There's
want to
also
encourage that.
churches right on Route 9.
We want to encourage bikeability, all those things. So this really will absolutely, no question, slow traffic. That is one of the desired outcomes, but by the same token, it makes the village much more, increases connectivity, makes it more walkable, more bikeable, and much safer. So those are the objectives, and we'll continue to, as we create our project map and talk about these projects collectively, because they do all intersect with each other. There's a very, each project that we're doing, the road diet, the DRI projects, all of these things interconnect in a way that's quite strategic and important, and based on overarching goals that we do hear from our constituents on an almost daily basis. So we will make sure that those things are communicated as fully as possible.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions to my left? Are there questions to my right? Thank you for coming. I just figured might as well, because the rest is the Stuart Kahan show, and you're certainly welcome to stay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. So now where are we? So next is proposed local law regarding open burn. So I will turn this over to Corporation Counsel and Chief Sylvester.
I know, right?
I always forget.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, folks. As I indicated in my memo to you, there was an open burning, prohibition on open burning statute in the village that was first passed in 1964.
Oh.
When the code was revised in 74, the section was repealed and was not added. It's created a little bit of an issue because on occasion, we've sometimes had tickets written under the old code, which is embarrassing because it's not part of the code anymore. So really thanks to the chief, Lieutenant Donahue, and Sergeant McGovern, first I had to find the old section, which we did, and then it was a matter of seeing what we could put into the village code to make up for that. And what I presented is what would be, in addition to the code, a new chapter 96, which is technically called burning, open, and follows in large part what are the state fire code regulations with regard to what is and is not permitted.
Thank you.
Would allow fire pits, would allow portable fire pits, portable fireplaces, grills, all that would be permitted. There are certain distance requirements that are set forth based upon the state code. But more importantly is what is not permitted. You're not permitted to burn refuse. You're not permitted to burn yard waste. You're not permitted to burn construction materials. None of that is permitted under any circumstance and would be subject to a violation. And all fires that are permitted must be, particularly fire pits and fireplaces, must have a responsible adult in attendance at all times. There must be either there must be an immediately present means of extinguishing the fire, be it a garden hose, be it a water barrel, be it sand, whatever has to be there. And all that is necessary. The laws for open burning or prohibition on open burning throughout the state are fairly uniform. If you look at them, there are some states, not some municipalities, that have a permit process. I did not include a permit process here. The only permit that's mentioned here deals with fire pits and fireplaces that are permanent in structure, particularly fireplaces. Those do and will require a building permit to be issued by the building department. And that's something that I
Outdoor
had
ones.
discussed with
Those are
Joe.
for outdoor.
The
Yeah.
correct. The portable would not be, but they are already subject to certain restrictions with regard to their construction anyway. Important things in terms of what, and we also have a whole section in here, proposed in here, on what we call recreational fires, which you might basically call campfires. I did not include bonfires, which other locations do have, but they're much larger and take in a larger area. In a village of this size, that's probably not the thing to have. But a recreational fire like a campfire where you might want to toast marshmallows or just sit around, you could have that. Again, they have to be attended fires where someone has to be there to be in a position to put them out if need be. And as I said, the key things is would it be prohibited pursuant to this code, and it would then give both the building department and the police department the ability to write violations, which at this point we can't write because we don't have it on our code. So this way they could be written. And one thing that also would be a permitted activity would be fire training. So that in the event that there would be such training needed, that would be permitted under the code. And that's pretty much what this is. And as I said, it's to remedy a circumstance that occurred in 1974, and I don't think anyone picked up the fact that it was never carried through. The 64 regulation was not as extensive as this. It was basically that no combustible substance of any kind shall be set on fire or burned in any street within the limits of the village of Ossining. But it did say then that the substance could be lawfully burned upon any lot, but only in an approved fireproof container. We've sort of expanded that certain things just can't be burned under any circumstances. And because of that, there are certain things that could be burned, and that's what I've just discussed. And that's basically it. What does carry over from the prior code was that no person shall set fire or cause to be fire any burned, any grass, weeds, brush, or other rubbish or materials. There it said in a careless or dangerous manner. Here, you just can't do it. So you will not be permitted to burn leaves. You won't be permitted to burn yard waste or anything like that. You have a specific group of what can and cannot be burned. So that's the proposed local law to remedy the otherwise gap in our code. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I did provide a copy to the chief. I provided a copy to the building inspector, who was kind enough to send me the provisions from the state code, specifically with regard to distance as to where specific the fire should be located. And that's where we are. One last thing, the recreational fires or the fires in the portable fire pits, if you're going to be using wood, it has to be clean wood, cannot be laminate, can't be varnished, can't be stained or anything. Has to be, as we have it, natural, seasoned, and dry firewood or natural lumber. That's what would be permitted to be burned. And that's that.
Okay, any additional comments? Okay, from the chief. So to my left, questions, comments?
Just a general question, Stuart. Was any a lot of complaints about fires?
The police had been writing violations for this, but unfortunately, because the code doesn't have it, those violations had to be dismissed.
So with this, so let me ask you this, if I'm having a barbecue in my house, is the police has the right, or the building department has the right to come in and verify what kind of wood am I burning? Or how does that
The
process?
grilling is actually one of the exceptions in terms of permitted activities.
Barbecues and that.
But what it does say is you should be,
Bonfire, a
well,
small-
well,
not a
but what it does say is that grilling should be using charcoal,
Yeah.
propane, clean wood, or natural gas. I'll say it this way. If for some reason someone sees an immense amount of smoke
Yeah.
coming from your home, or if there's an odor, which then that can actually result in being inspected to see what it is. And if it turns out that it's not clean wood that's being used, you can be written up.
I just want to make sure that unless it's a complaint or unless something that is a cause for either the police department or the building department, you know, they're not just going to go there and investigate something that they
No.
may just be doing for the marshmallows, for argument's sake.
What it provides is in any situation where an outdoor fire is deemed to pose an imminent danger to public health, safety, and welfare, the building inspector, this is the building inspector, and or his designee and police officers may enter onto the property where the outdoor fire is located to inspect the property for the purpose of ascertaining compliance with the provisions of the chapter. So if they, presumably it would be a complaint that they would have been told something was going on, they could go, or if it was observed. I mean, if a code enforcement officer is walking by and there's an immense amount of smoke coming out of the back, that's something that they could check on. So that's where that would come in.
On this side, everybody okay? Dana, we're good?
No, I just, you know,
Questions?
glad to know my fire pit's okay.
So
I do love it.
I have a question. Could you just explain to me the enforcement part? Who does what? When does the building department go? When does the police department go? What's the difference?
Well, since we don't have a 24/7 building department,
Mhm.
there would be occasions where if the police were to observe a violation, they could write the ticket. If a code enforcement officer did, they could write it.
So this is an either or. Either can enforce
It
this.
says here, the chief of police, building inspector, and his/her designees are authorized to enforce the provisions of
So
the
they
chapter.
don't all have to be there. It's either or.
Correct.
That's not how many of our laws are written. So that's why I'm trying to understand the enforcement. Okay, great. So it looks like it's a,
I just
Oh,
have,
yep.
I think this is great that it's back. 95% of the people that we pull up, we get the call. They have no idea
Mhm.
that this is something I think needs to get pushed out on the website too, please.
Yeah, we need to educate is what you're saying.
Right.
Maybe the fire department can also do some stuff on, I don't know if they have websites.
Yeah,
or
we could
whatever.
do something. Once we put something
Once
together,
this is
we'll
up, yeah,
we'll put it over,
yeah.
put it on the Facebook page.
The most common things that I've seen is people burn leaves,
Leaves, And
garbage.
we've had
seen
habitual construction burning too.
Oh, interesting. That one I had sped up. I've seen leaves and people, when you go up, I mean, I had a new neighbor and we just went up to them and said, you know, because they were flying, you know, they burn, but they fly.
Right.
And they're like, oh, we moved in from upstate New York. You're allowed to do it up there. Actually, they're not allowed to, as it turns out, when we looked it up and they said, we've been doing this for years. They just didn't know. And once we explained, you know, the stuff is flying, goes into, and it could set things up. You know, people just don't know. I mean, I don't think they were trying to do anything, you know, but also they were saving money and time, because gathering those leaves takes a lot more time than burning them.
It's interesting, the state code explicitly prohibits burning of yard waste,
Mhm.
including leaves, in villages. In towns under or over 20,000, the town can have a separate regulation. But the 20,000 in terms of population includes anyone in the village that is within the town. So, if
That's-
but it's prohibited in any village. That's very clear from the state
So
code.
the education part's important. And my last one is, speaking of the town, does the town have a separate regulation about this? Is this being coordinated? Are you sending it to them? Do they even need one if New York State has?
I have
one?
no, I don't know what the town has. I've not coordinated with them with regards.
They
to
have
this
a
one.
section for open burn. Theirs does not cover fire pits, definitions of and restrictions on.
All right, well, somebody, Karen, maybe you just send it to the supervisor. Just, I mean, why not? Why not just send it and say we're next week, we're doing this and, no? Oh, it already is.
It's
You're
in their
saying
code. It
is,
covers
but-
burning. It doesn't regulate building permits for fire pits.
Okay,
So the
So
issue that we're
it's-
actually addressing is
They
already
have that.
covered.
they have that. Okay, so good. I didn't understand. I thought you said exactly the opposite. Thanks for. Next,
So we'll call for a public hearing next week.
thank you.
Next would be and thank you, Chief, is an introduction to amendments to Chapter 162, which is, since it's the Housing Maintenance Code, we could almost call it the kitchen sink part of the village code, because everything and anything seems to end up there. This entire chapter needs to be revised for a couple of reasons. The first is that the state has changed its regulations for what is required for a code program. For example, as I mentioned in my note earlier today, parking garages, which are now parking structures, to be precise, which are now required by the code to have what's called a condition assessment, both before construction or before a CO is issued, and then on a periodic basis. We have 3 such structures in the village now, Harbor Square, 25 State, and Kemmy's Cove. And they are required to provide reports. So that's where that is. If when 30 Water Street comes online, they would have to actually get a CO. They would actually have to have a condition assessment before the CO is even issued. So part of it is to be consistent with the state code. And there have been many municipalities that have been in the process of doing this over the past few weeks, because it really went into effect at the very end of 2022. But the other part of the revision to 162 will be to deal with the various articles that we now have dealing with exterior structure, interior structure, plumbing, electrical, all that. The proposal will be, and I've discussed this with Joe Augustinelli, is to actually take all of that out of the code. And the reason that would all come out is because it's all part of the state code, and we will all be following the state code. There's no reason to have essentially a village section that says you can't do X and a state section that says you can't do X. What we do is we write appearance tickets with both of them on there. You don't need then the state, it's actual surplus. You don't need it, you can get rid of it, and you can just essentially rely wholly on what the state code has for all of those sections. If we want to have a particular section that is more stringent, we are permitted to do so. But our code at this point is not in that sense more stringent. So we can in fact just essentially follow what we've got there. And that will, clean, what I think clean it up. It will make it a simpler chapter. Also, if you look at 162, it starts with loads of definitions dealing with structures and things like that. Again, all of those definitions are in the state code. So if the idea will be, we will just follow what the state code is, or whatever it then ultimately amends it. Part of the work on the zoning chapter will be to deal with definitions, but by relying on the state definitions for the building code, we won't have to basically have 2 different sets and do all those things. So that will make the definitional portion a great deal easier. One of the other things that we're going to do is the chapter we have now in the code, chapter 95, dealing with unsafe buildings, will be brought into this particular chapter, and it will be a more streamlined process. So it won't require having to get a surveyor, it won't require all that. Basically, if the building inspector believes that there is an issue with a building that's unsafe or requires to be vacated, he will issue a notice. They will have X number of days to get that done. If they don't, basically, I can come before this board and say, we want to bring an action in court to compel them to do this. And so it will streamline that process. So this is essentially what we're looking for doing for chapter 162. So part of it is to be consistent with the state code, which is, been writing all over it here. And part of it is to make changes with regard to our own code. One of the things that the state now requires is that the building department must provide what they call climatic and geographic design criteria with regard to the village, including things such as snow load, wind design load, seismic category, damage from weathering, annual mean temperature. And this is actually a chart that the state provides. All we have to do is fill in the blanks. But that's there, and that can be provided to anyone who comes in, any design, architect, engineer, things like that. So that's what the proposal will be. My anticipation is that at an April work session, the revision will be presented to you folks in the form of a proposed local law. Again, I've been in contact with Joe Augustinelli with a lot of this. And we both agree that, and I've also discussed it with Deputy Corporation Counsel Tanksley, that to the extent that we can avoid, duplicating efforts in terms of code sections and things like that, it's so much the better. It will make it easier when we're in court, and it will make it easier on the code enforcement officers. The code enforcement officers are all certified to write state code violations. So it's not like we're asking them to do something they don't do. They do it already. But this way, they'll be able to just write those violations based upon what the state code, and primarily when I say the state code, that's the uniform code, primarily it's either the property maintenance code or it's the residential property code. Those are the two codes that are primary. On occasion, we'll have some violations of the fire code, which does come into play, but that's the proposal. And that's what we'll be following up with in April with an actual local law for you folks to see.
Okay, questions? I'm going to my right here.
I have a question. So when someone wants to look at what our code is for something, they can find it online, right? I mean, we have so if you're going to remove a lot of the local stuff from the code and replace it with the state, how will you incorporate? Will you
Well-
have like a link to the state, or you know what I mean? Like,
Well, we could have a link. The other thing that can be done, and maybe we can put it on the building department site, it can link to those codes. And there are multiple codes. I was like, of the uniform code, there's like 10 different code books, and each code book is about 600 pages. But we can provide a link to that.
Yeah.
And if anyone is watching here, if you go onto the New York State Department of State website and you go to the code enforcement section, the codes are there. And what you would get is you're able to actually look at the New York State codes, but you can't print anything because there's a fee to do all that, but you can actually see the physical code. So I think that there can certainly be a means of putting a link in there. The actual code we wouldn't put in there because of its size. Indeed, even if you go to the state regs, it refers to where you can purchase the code. We won't put that in, but we'll put in links where people can actually see what the code says, so that they can look at it. Because what an order to remedy or an appearance ticket would say would be, for example, real property code, real property code section 307.1. And so now in the order to remedy or in the appearance ticket, that will actually be quoted because we do that now. But if someone actually wants to see it in advance, we can certainly provide them with links to that.
You look like you're still thinking. Okay, great. So what you need from us tonight is,
Nothing.
okay, and nothing you shall have. What else do we have?
No question?
Do have.
Oh, I thought I went to my left before, sorry.
It's a great story. And I agree with Dana. Some of the stuff I actually have
Yeah.
spoken to Joe, our building inspector, to actually have those links in there. All the municipalities have that. I guess my question to you is, like, looking in the future, because I don't know what New York State may do in the next 5 years or the next 10 years. Because prior to 2020, prior to 2020, we had actually, the building was under the international building called the IBC itself. So, and that pretty much, it changed. It was for a period of time. I want to say maybe 5 years for argument's sakes. But so when we talked about New York State codes, if we're going to be tying our, our ordinance or related to in our code itself and saying, take a look at section on New York State. If the state changes what they did a couple of years back and they go to the international, to the IBC itself, is that still linked to our changes that we're trying to make?
What I can tell you, Trustee Kazad, is this. Most of the municipalities that are now working on what's the new, it's to be formal, section 1203.3, which is where those provisions are. What they've effectively done is, in each case, they repeal their old code and they insert this completely new. And in their code, there's a reference, for example, what is the RPC? And it says the 2020,
New York State code. Yeah.
if it turns out that in 2027, the state says, we're getting rid of this, we're actually going to an international code, this board would then, or future board would have to look at revising that, and they would give you time to do that.
Got it.
What we have, what will be in here, though, is that presumably the 2020 will get revised in, let's say, 2024. What it will say is that the 2020 code and any subsequent revisions adopted by the state of New York, so that therefore we're not every week looking at,
Right.
changing it.
And that makes
So
sense.
that's what it would be. But if they decided to gut the entire thing, then what you'd probably have to do is just
And then you'll come back to the
reveal,
future
and
board.
you'll call me out of retirement. I'll come back and I'll do that. That's what we would do. But that's what it would be. But I've looked at a lot of these, and they all essentially just in fact, in the state code, I can just let you know, when they have under their definition section, one of their definitions is FCNYS, the 2020 Fire Code of the state of New York. That's actually in their code. So it would seem under the understanding that they're going to go with that but if they decided to gut it, we would just have to change it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And again, I agree with you, and that makes sense. I just want to make sure that, if we can look on the future, because we don't know I know the state is working on the new updates, and they're coming up with their always clarifications to our existing code.
Right.
The other question I had for you is because we actually, New York City has established the garage inspections.
Right.
And actually they're going to start either some areas in New York City itself, they start this year.
Right.
And other areas of the borough
Right.
start next year, depending on where you are. So I was wondering, because I know there's a couple buildings up the street from us.
Right.
Crown Avenue. I believe they also have garages underneath. And I don't think you mentioned
I
those.
think it goes, but the definition of the parking structure is very specific. So if it's basically just on earth or fill, that's not considered a parking structure requiring the assessment. It's basically got to have the levels.
Got it.
So that's
All right.
why we've only got the three
Got it.
so far.
Okay.
As I said, Harbor Square, 25 State, and Kemmys Cove.
Yeah, I haven't read the New York State in detail, but I know White Plains, Yonkers, New Rochelle, they have their own sections of those codes that already have established that already on their books.
And if this board, with discussions with the building department, thought that it was necessary to make it a more stringent review, you could do that. Currently, the condition assessment has to be after the initial has to be done every 3 years. If you thought that it needed to be done every 24 months, because remember, it's not done by our department.
Right.
It's done by an outside engineer
But it's
hired by the
by
building
the-
owner,
By the,
by the owner. So, but you are correct. But that's why, because I actually spoke with Joe today, they have only 3, given what the definition is here.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah, because the New York City is totally different.
Right.
Yeah, and then White Plains and New Rochelle and Yonkers are different as well. Okay. Besides that, I really didn't have any other comments. I know, again, a lot of the stuff makes sense already, and I know the municipalities already do that in regards to the climate charge, which has always been in the book on the New York State Code anyway, so it makes it easier to standardize
Right.
at least the title page. So it makes it easy for Joe to look at that it's complying with the current codes.
Right.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Appreciate it. You have a question? Not generally, but I feel like you've been taking so many notes. So
Opportunity, I thought, no?
not, no.
Legislative.
Legislative is on the alternating Wednesdays. And that's where you get certain minutes. This is a work session. The purpose of the work session is actually for the village staff and others that are invited and placed on the agenda to present ideas, concepts, progress reports that the village is doing to the elected Board of Trustees, because we're actually legislators. New legislation is discussed, sometimes lots of back and forth. Yeah, so next week is, do you have something specific to this? Is that what you're here to do?
That's not what I'm here for, but I do have a question because it involves me.
Oh, okay. Technically, it would be next week that you would, right? It would be next. Well, you can come next week. You have actually two different opportunities. Okay.
Next, we have, and I know we have our planning consultant Valerie Monastra with us, just to discuss the proposed escrow fee schedule.
Okay.
Next week, this board will be voting to adopt the local law, which revises portions of Chapter 91 dealing with escrow. Valerie has worked on the schedule based upon the discussions that the board had with us a few weeks back. Valerie, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Hello. So I think you have as part of your packet, the revised fee schedule based upon our discussions last week. I think the couple changes were really focusing on the wetland permits. There was concern that there's two different tiers for the wetland permit. One can be issued directly by the building department, and the other one requires planning board approval. And so this just differentiates between the two. So the one that can go directly to the building, get issued by the building inspector is we're proposing only $250 because it does require to have a wetland consultant just take a quick look at the site, but it won't require any sort of planning board approval. The one that requires planning board approval is going to be more of an intensive type of wetlands mitigation. We'll probably have a wetlands mitigation plan, so it would require additional work from the wetlands consultant. Other than that, I believe we kept most of everything else the same. So this is what we're proposing to include in your fee schedule.
I'm gonna go to the left. Manny?
Thank you, Valerie. For some reason, I thought it was something else besides the wetland permit. And I don't have my notes with me.
I believe there might have been one other item, might have been like maybe the special permit that we raised to like $750, but I think that was about it. Oh, and then there was one other thing. You had a question about the village, when it had other village code appeal to ZBA. I think the way we worded it was a little confusing. You thought it was just, it sounded like it was just going to the ZBA for like an area variance or use variance. And so we made it clear that this would really be village code appeals to the ZBA associated with other chapters within the village code.
Okay, to my right, questions, comments, thoughts?
If this meets with the board's approval next week, in addition to the resolution to adopt the local law, we would also have a resolution to adopt the change to the fee schedule so that this can follow with the local law.
Okay.
Thank you, Valerie.
All right, thank you.
All right,
That's all yours. I'm sorry.
looks like we might be done, but I don't.
Yes, our agenda is now concluded.
Okay. So the meeting is concluded and we're adjourning to.
You have a motion to adjourn to executive session for matters of personnel.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I only get to use my gavel like once a night here. So this concludes the meeting. It is 9:05. Thank you all. See you next Wednesday for legislative session.